Welcome to Exposing Deathcare, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on the funeral industry, revealing the truth behind its darkest practices. I'm your host, Em, and each episode we bring you real stories from funeral directors and death care workers who have experienced the best and worst of this hidden world. Listener discretion is advised. The stories shared in this podcast are presented anonymously to protect the privacy of the individuals involved. Thank you for listening, and we hope that by sharing these stories, we can work together to improve the funeral industry for everyone involved. Hello, and welcome to the 13th episode of the first season of Exposing Deathcare, the podcast. We're shitting it up a little bit. We're changing it up, shaking it up, not shitting it up. You can tell I'm going to have to edit this already. We are shaking it up a little bit with what our normal programming is, but I think it's good to expand into these different things when we are exposing behind the scenes in death care. And today I am inviting a guest on that will tell us who they are, and that is a first for this podcast. Also, we're going to be focusing on a heavy topic today, so we do want to go over some resources for you at the end. I am introducing our guest who has just, in my opinion, been an up-and-comer, just flying to the top of the funeral industry in the offers that they've had for employment, in the groundbreaking that they've been doing on their own. I introduce you, William. Hello.
Hello, my name is William. My legal name is William Turner Heath, and soon I'm going to be dropping my last name. I've wanted to do it for a really long time. I've got a very complicated family, and working in death care, brings all the things up. And I think it's really important that people in end of life, people who do death care work, kind of deal with their own family trauma, deal with their own baggage in their life. And it's really important that we're really honest about this work and how hard it is.
While you're talking about a name change, I too had a name change by choice. The process was pretty easy, but it was weaponized against me years after I did it, which was only a couple years ago. I wasn't supported by my family, and I didn't want the name that I had been given to be my name forever, because I was like, I have no prospects to get married. This is not on my plate right now. So I chose my own last name.
I'm doing so much research to sort of figure out what I should do. And I was recently slated to get married, and that's changed. And so now I'm sort of left with the possibility of just truncating my last name to get some distance from my father. And so I'll just keep my name, William Turner, and drop my last name. So it doesn't feel like it's going far away, but it does feel like a declaration that feels important to me. And it's something I've wanted to do for a really long time. But what
I
kind of pushback
understand.
did you get on? What kind of pushback did you get?
It was being said that I changed my name to dodge my past, like when I had started off my social media. I kind of wanted some anonymity when I transitioned from Texas to Washington, and
Uh-huh.
it was also kind of like another declaration of my independence from things that held me back in the past. So everything that I had done it for was reduced to I was running from something.
Coming from the art world, like these kinds of things are so celebrated and welcomed. And coming into death care, and I've only been in death care for a little while, it's so interesting and strange how the paradigms feel so different. So that's fascinating to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. I just remember, looking at death certificates early in my career going, I don't want to be never married. I don't want to be never married. I've pretty much accepted that at this point, and I'm okay with it. So I wanted my own last name, dang it. So we totally went off the chain with that, but it has a little bit to do with, the online bullying, which
Yeah.
is a topic we're going to get into.
Okay.
So now that you've shared a little bit about your name, what can you tell us about your background in funeral service and what led you to be interested in it in the first place?
Oh, that's such a hard question. I get it so frequently. Before coming into Deathcare, I was an art curator. I worked with the U.S. consulate traveling exhibitions internationally. And I reached a point where I just felt like the art world was so self indulgent. And I wanted to do something that felt more meaningful. And when I was 20, art felt like the most meaningful thing in the world. I had moved back to Miami, where I'm originally from, and I was looking at programs. And in the back of my mind, 6 Feet Under has like always been in my subconscious. I was
Oh, yeah.
so enamored by that show. I was so enamored with the possibility of being creative, the possibility of standing in front of families and being of like advice giving, being an
Mhm.
oracle, being a trusted advisor, being someone in the community that was regarded as like a problem solver or a fixer. That felt like a big deal to me. An art curator is a protector of objects and legacy, and my move into funeral services felt really easy and simple. It was a huge, like in terms of the math and science, there was definitely a little bit of struggle there. But I graduated with high honors from Miami-Dade College right before the pandemic, and I would do my entire internship during the pandemic. I'm still only a few years licensed, and I specialized in natural burial in Gainesville, Florida. I moved back to where I went to art school at the University of Florida, so that I can be in proximity to Prairie Creek Conservation Cemetery. I knew straight out of the gate that I wanted to be a natural burial person, that I wanted to do services that allowed families to be involved in the ceremony, that allowed for more unorthodox ceremony, for different spiritual practices outside of the dominant religious practices in America. I knew I wanted to be in a hippie town. And so I moved back to Gainesville to do my internship at Milan Funeral Home. I'm so incredibly grateful to my funeral home. As complicated as an internship was, it was a really important place for me to sort of like cut my teeth, have some experiences, be back in a town where I had strong relationships with people. And I'd been gone for a really long time, living all over the United States, but it was a place that I could come home to, and that was a really important place for me.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I remember initially communicating with you for the first time through Instagram messages, I believe, or maybe somewhere on Facebook, but you were still in mortuary school when you first started following my account.
Yes.
So you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly.
I've seen it all. I wasn't in school yet, but you were just. Someone told me about you after I had literally just left Boston. My life
Oh.
exploded. I had a nervous breakdown about not sure what I was going to do with my life, and being an artist wasn't working out. And that was
Mhm.
literally the moment where I was moving back to Florida, trying to figure out, and had not picked funeral service yet. I actually almost became a dialysis technician.
Ooh.
So cleaning blood or working with dead people were the two things that I decided were my options.
I took the artist background thing as well. I was very talented in art, up through high school, and then I stopped doing it. But that was the initial thing that drew me to mortuary science, was taking somebody sick, frail, and broken and making them look whole again. It was the
Yeah,
whole art of it. Uh, which quickly, what is it? The blinders eventually came off and the mouth started flapping, and we all know how that goes.
yeah, yeah,
So let's go into some of the trauma, PTSD, whatever we want to discuss about it. So you have had an incident that's happened in the last year, and it has caused you grief, among other things. We're going to kind of touch on that. So I open the door to you to share what you would like.
yeah. Whew, this is a really hard conversation. The last year has probably been one of the hardest years of my entire life. 2024 was a dumpster fire. In 2023, I attempted to start a business. I attempted to develop a natural burial focused business. It was an interesting experiment. We tried and workshopped what it would look like to put together a business plan, and worked for a year. In this last year, I put to bed a project in which I was working to raise money to buy a funeral home and established solely focused on natural burial funeral home. My partner of almost 5 years and I separated, and my family made a decision that my grief this last year was so big that they would essentially Baker Act me, which is in the state of Florida, is when someone goes to the court and makes an argument that you're a harm to possibly a harm to yourself, and put me in a psych ward for my birthday this last year. In the court order, they made a declaration that I was bipolar. They made a declaration that I was non-compliant to my therapist, and on and on and on. These accusations were incredibly damaging to me professionally. They damaged my relationship with my partner and kind of unfurled a lot of chaos.
Mm,
And I didn't handle it very well.
mm,
I felt misunderstood. I felt really frustrated by my family. My father and I have been estranged for years, and he has narcissistic traits. He's never been formally diagnosed. He's too smart to be diagnosed, to be quite honest. I was abused, and I recently began seeking PTSD therapy. I've been in therapy for over 11 years now, unpacking this and doing the work of funeral services and working with families. Like, you see it all. There's been very few families who have surprised me or who necessarily triggered me. But when you walk in the space as a funeral director in an arrangement, your own stuff like gets pushed and gets touched, and you have to be careful about it because it's about the families. It's not about our own stuff. But we bring those things with us in the arrangement room. Um, a lot of the emotional intelligence that I depend upon is the result of growing up in a really traumatic household. I had to shapeshift and be and people please and fawn um all the time, and so I'm incredibly adept at navigating kind of interpersonal conflict. But it doesn't mean I've necessarily healed myself. And I think there's a lot of people in funeral industry who have really hard backgrounds. I think it takes a certain kind of person to be able to deal with really, really hard things. I think
yeah,
a lot of us in the industry um, have backgrounds that are challenging. And I think that something is met in that. So I think the place I found the kind of chaos, the kind of dopamine and adrenaline and cortisol has been in this work. I feel comfortable and I feel safe when there's danger and when there's only one danger. I've
hmm
thought a lot about going further into emergency management, doing active shooter training, working for DMORT or FEMARS in the state of Florida. We have our own state version of DMORT. Something about that feels interesting to me, and I think some of that feels like a good use of the kind of trauma of my childhood.
that's deep.
Yeah, and it's scary to be really public about these kinds of things. The fact that my family put into a court document that I'm bipolar, even though I've been in
Mm.
therapy for over a decade, was incredibly disempowering.
Let's let's talk about court documents. I've actually been under legal abuse for the last 2 years. People will write anything and put it into court record, and other people will take that and believe it as gospel truth. So I
Yeah,
connect with you in that instance.
the court of
Again,
public opinion is dangerous and you have to be really careful, but I felt really violated, and it's the reason why I've decided to change my name. I want some distance from that because that's not me. I'm a goddamn Care Bear. I'm a
mhm,
helper. And what I was experiencing was tremendous grief. And grief can actually be misdiagnosed as different mental health disorders. I've been in therapy for a really, really long time. I have had two psychiatrists. I have been consistently seeing my therapist for a really long time. And I've been dealing with abuse for a really long time and unpacking that. And I've hinted at this online for a really long time, but this is the first time I've really just kind of put it out there that I was abused as a kid. I was abused physically, I was abused mentally, And I'm starting to explore some other accusations that are pretty scary for me. When I was doing my outpatient from the psych visit, I brought them a stack of grief books because they, quite frankly, had no language to talk about this. They had no way to understand my experience outside of the kind of language that pathologizes feelings. Like, our modern day mental health system is pretty liberal with diagnoses when you're in crisis, and that is dangerous. My insurance company immediately called me, and I was really freaked out by it.
Hmm.
And so I'm in the process now of pushing back on that diagnosis. I fundamentally reject, and I have documentation. The little time that I've been on psych meds, the symptoms from those medicines were tremendously awful, and I would much rather take battling depression about having a really hard year in which my business failed and put away the possibility of the person who was the love of my life not being my person. Letting go of like renovating my home, having a business together, and being so close to the life I've always wanted, and suddenly it going away. It's
And that's
tremendous.
grief. You are
Yeah.
grieving the loss of all of that. And it doesn't matter. People are like, the death of a loved one, that is a death of a loved one in a way, except you can't talk to them most of the time. I mean, at that point, you don't want to be around them or see them.
No,
And if you,
communication stopped really abruptly, and I
uh-huh.
experienced things that are exactly like a death. The few experiences I've had with death have been pretty intense for me. I've had moments of depersonalizations or feeling like untethered from reality. That is what grief looks like. It's messy. Anger can happen and it's okay. We are disoriented from life and it can send us thrashing about. And that is what grief is. And as funeral directors, we know this.
So going through all that, um, I wanted to ask, how have you maintained being able to go to a therapist, um, while in school, getting into the mortuary field? I have struggled with that. And when I share a little bit more here, I'll kind of go into, there were places where I worked that I did not have insurance and I did not have access to therapy and medication. So how did that look for you?
Um, I've always found a way. Healthcare.gov has been really kind to me. I legally am Native American also, and this has helped make my copays really affordable. My father could live on a reservation if he wanted to and has a high enough percentage of heritage. We've traveled to Oklahoma where we verified in the DOS rolls our lineage. And so that's been incredibly helpful to me. But I've always sought out mental health services, be it pay what you can. I've just always made it a priority in my life. I've known from a very young age that I was living in a family that was just really out there. I knew that I needed to do this work to heal myself and that it was going to take a really long time. When I was a young child, I used to study psych books. In fact, I was going to study psychology, and the day before school started in college, I changed to art. I find myself now looking at funeral work, looking at end of life work. I'm an end of life doula. And I feel after this experience so incredibly drawn to talk about, to study, and to learn a lot more about grief. I've been looking at thanatology programs. I'm working on an e-guide to end of life, and the first article that I'm working on is around men and grief and anger. Well, I feel like I'm coming back full circle to when I was starting college, and I'm incredibly interested in psychology right now. But also, I have a healthy fear of psychology, which has a kind of carceral prison moment to it. My experience in the psych ward was terrible. I was
Mm.
so bored. They forgot to pay the cable bill, and so there was no television on the whole time. And I was so bored that I pretended to work there. I cleaned the walls, I disinfected the tables. I kind of started having my own kind of group sessions because the group therapy sessions were like,
Oh,
welcome. Would you like to learn about square breaths? Great. Let's talk about square breaths. Cool. Thanks for coming. And I was like, this is it? I could do this.
oh, Okay, I get to tell you my story of going inpatient. What other activities did you do other
It
than
was
square breathing?
nothing. My mother brought me a Noam Chomsky book, and so I was reading about the Arab Spring the whole time I was there. There was no television, and all they wanted to give me was sugary snacks, and I was like, "Can I have some water, please? Can I have a pretzel?" Like
Fruit,
the
please.
entire it was like I felt like I was in prison, and there was no television, so
No,
essentially it was a prison. And
no.
so
They,
they didn't pay the cable bill, so there was no
no, you have.
television.
I have heard you have more. I had a stint in jail.
3.5 days of boredom and hell.
Only 3.5
I was
days.
an excellent. In fact, my paperwork says that I'm incredibly caring. Is what they had down as my notes for my behavior.
Oh,
Was that I was
uh-huh.
caring. So I just pretended
Yep.
I worked there the whole time.
Oh yeah, because the Baker Act is you have to be there at least 3 days.
I
Just
think something like that. I mean, whatever the minimum was, I made sure it happened. I was like, as
Mhm.
soon as I got there, I was asking people, okay, what is the secret? How do you get out of here? Like, just tell me, I'll do anything. Just let me know. And I was there trying to figure out the puzzle because I was mortified and angry, and it was my birthday. My
Oh
dad, a signature move of my father is to make things happen on special days. And so he made sure that I was put into this facility. I like the word inpatient, it sounds a little less awful.
yeah,
He got me an inpatient for my birthday.
nice way to go, Dad. Shit. All right, so did you have any extra special characters at
Yeah,
at
I had lots
inpatient?
of extra special characters. I mean, I turned into a different person in there. When I walked in
Yeah.
there, I displayed acts of aggression to establish dominance, which is
Oh,
so unlike me.
well, let me tell you about a character I remember when I went inpatient. Um, yeah, this individual would grab their belly fat and pinch it and act like they pulled some of it off, and then they throw it at you, throw it at you, throw it at you, and they'd have their head down, but they'd be looking up through their bangs, like their hair, and they'd reach down again and they'd grab some more of their chub and they take it back and they throw it at you, throw it at you. And so she picked on me more because I actually would react. I'd be like, "Oh hell no!" And I'd hold up a coloring book and I'd be like, "Blah, blocked it, blah, blocked it." She hated
Oh,
that.
no, I walked in there and turned into a different person because I was so scared of this. I felt like I was going to prison, and so it's like
Yeah.
all of the Netflix shows I ever watched. I was like, okay, you have to do something to establish dominance, which that's so unlike me. And then I immediately went into caregiving. Like
Yeah.
I mean, there was two young men saying some pretty alarming things to me, and I just held space for them. And someone jokingly offered me a job when I was there, which I thought was
Mm,
I was pretty flattered by that. Because
nice.
I was so bored that I just started disinfecting the tables and walls, and I gave my Arab Spring Noam Chomsky book away to a woman who was incredibly fascinated with the fact that I was reading. I mean, I couldn't be bothered with the puzzle that they had. That was like the only entertainment in the entire place was coloring sheets. Like I was a
Mm,
2-year-old when I came in to inpatient. I was so angry that my birthday party was going to be happening the next day. I was so like visibly angry that I got put in like a single room by myself, which was a big deal to like not have to share with some rando stranger. I felt like a space alien there.
so ask me about mine.
Melissa, I've recently learned that you had a psych visit. Would you tell us a little bit more about that experience?
Yes. It was August of 2023, and then honestly, it was a long time coming. I had all of my belongings taken from me, and I was in a transition space where I was working, where I was living, um, and had been in a situation where uh, I had been unable to leave this facility that I was working and living at for multiple days, and we were well into the 90s with no air conditioning, no shower, some other things that escalated to me also not having access to a prescription that I needed to have refilled. Uh, I elected to go inpatient because I didn't know what else to do. I was at the end of my rope and I was considering terminating myself. Um, I had the forethought to reach out to individuals that I trusted to get care for Kermit if I was electing to go inpatient and try to figure myself out. He was my first priority. So I made sure that he was handled. At the time, I had a mobile pet funeral business, and I had a pet in refrigeration that with somebody I thought I could trust. Um, and I had arrangements for someone to pick that pet up and take it to cremation while I was inpatient. That got weaponized against me. So I went to the hospital after I got Kermit situated. Um, I was, I mean, like I've never had the state my body and my mind were in at that point. I've never been that broken before. I could barely talk without crying. Um, I shook. I can't even like just. I was not okay. I was, I I can recognize I was not okay. So I asked to go inpatient because I was suicidal, and I didn't get to pick where I went. They just put me in the ambulance, and because I'm rural, like I'm in a really rural area currently, they had to drive me about 2 hours, maybe an hour and a half, maybe an hour and a half away, to a facility where the check-in process alone was just so degrading. Like, they have you change into scrubs. I found out later that, if you were wearing sweatpants, you could have kept it on, but I had never been there before. This was all new to me, so I got to wear scrubs. But you sit in a cold room and you're waiting, and I would disassociate, just lay there and disassociate and put myself somewhere else. And eventually, I got checked in and given a room. The first area that they put me in had male and females in it, and I guess that was just the first bed that they had. But 6 hours in there, and I was approaching the staff crying. I was like, "I can't stay here. I can't do this." There were multiple individuals throwing chairs on that side. I was in way over my head, and they immediately, addressed my condition and were like, "Oh no, we need to move you over to the ladies' side where we just had somebody check out. We've got an open bed over there, so let's move you over there before they fill it with somebody from the outside." So thankfully, within 6 hours, I moved to a safer area, um, which had the lady that liked to throw her imaginary fat at me, which was way better than throwing chairs.
Oh my god, I'm
Um,
so glad that I was in co-ed. I don't think I could have been in a men's only side.
I probably slept the first 2 days I was there because I was just so broken. I didn't go to any meetings, and so then after that 2 days when I was like, "Okay, let's start going to therapy and figuring out what's wrong with me," to find out they were one-hour meetings once a day, I was baffled. I was like, "So what else are we gonna do here?"
Mhm.
And they were like, "Well, we're gonna give you this medication that you were on that you didn't have access to, and we're gonna give you this other medication to calm you." I'm like, "Whatever, give it to me. I don't care at this point." So I took all the little cocktails. I went to the little meetings where they didn't even really sit one-on-one with you except twice, in the whole 7 days that I was there because I had to go for 7 days because in order to have access to programs and mental health care outside of there, because I had been on a wait list in my area for over a year, and they had told me multiple times, well, in order to get counseling, you have to, either a spot opens up or you have to go inpatient and then get out. I figured they'd have access to therapy and a diagnosis and proper medication. So I stayed in the whole 7 days. Um, And as soon as I got out, that's a whole nother story. As soon as I got out, though, let's revisit this dog thing. I immediately went to retrieve the dog that had not been relinquished to a third party, on my behalf to take it to cremation. Instead, the individuals involved with that had contacted the pet parents through Facebook groups and said that I abandoned the dog in a random freezer in a shed in the woods. This was at someone's house, and I had a chest freezer side all to myself for this dog who was wrapped in 3 different blankets and had identifying tags on him.
Mhm.
So, that was something else that I was slashed for that I thought I'd go ahead and put an end to right there.
I mean, I heard about it from so many people. I mean, I remember about this time when this happened. I remember you being a little volatile online. I remember immediately people talking about it and hearing about it. I heard about tons of rumors about your mental health. I heard, and I think we've corrected this, but I misheard that you were bipolar. And so there was a lot of talk, and I imagine there's a ton of ramifications for this being so public.
Oh,
And
yeah.
how big of a deal it is for you to sort of unpack this and talk about this because the funeral industry whispers, and online reputation is a big deal. And it's why funeral homes are so scared of the public. It's why they're scared of journalists. It's why they're scared of bad reviews. Because there's this lingering fear of us. There's lingering fear of scandals that have happened. And so there is an immediate quelching of anything quickly to sort of kind of ease the public because we do see scandals and they impact the industry so much that we take this kind of overly um, quick and swift and judgment without finding out what actually happened. But I heard about this from Florida, and everyone was talking about you.
Oh, of course they were. Yeah, but the truth was I had just moved. So I had my own refrigeration when I started my pet, mobile cremation, water
Okay.
cremation services. So when I had to transition to living at that other facility as an interim, until I could find something else,
Yeah.
they would not allow me to have my pet clients kept there. So I made arrangements with one of the other connections to that business that was a dog trainer in the area. And she
Okay.
said, I have multiple freezers in my garage. You can utilize one of them to store the dog, but you have to clean it out. So I
Yeah.
spent like an hour taking a bunch of frozen meat that was for her dog and organizing it in a different freezer. And then I laid down the blanket and picked up the dog in the blanket that he had been wrapped in by the vet had one and the pet parent had one on him. And I had already tagged him in the back of my Honda Fit.
In terms of your statutes, you did everything that your state statutes required, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. And I thought the dog would be safe there. And then within a couple of days, it was clear that I was not going to be okay and needed to go inpatient. So again, I made arrangements for my dog and that dog to get its transportation to my provider a couple hours away. And the person at the house where this dog was kept refused to allow that person to come and get the dog because it
Well, that's
was
unfortunate.
far more salacious to say that I abandoned it there.
Yeah. Well, that's unfortunate. I mean, I've only met you in real life once at a conference, but my perception is that you like animals more than people. And so I've always
Yeah.
been a little skeptical that the full story didn't come out. And I still don't know everything, but if you followed all the statutes and you're saying that you were in a moment of transition and taking care of your mental health, like, I think that's an adequate response to the
I
situation, and I think you're gonna be embroiled in the kind of fallout this for a while, and you're just gonna have to keep working on it, and that's just what it's gonna look like.
Yep, I did everything that I possibly could within my power to respect the
Yeah,
dog and the family, and these individuals made it a spectacle. Um, and it just I've lost a lot of trust in people. Like, it's just, yeah, it's been really interesting. So, oh yeah, at therapy, I mean, not therapy, but at my inpatient, we had coloring sheets as well, multiple puzzles. They did have TV, but they were only playing like uh those like Nick at Night shows. You know what I'm
Oh,
saying?
that
The
sounds
black and whites.
that would have been perfect for me. I would have been on a cloud nine. I would have had a slumber party and organized snacks.
Oh, they
I
got
would have.
onto us for laying down on the couches, so we had to sit up, which totally ruined my idea of watching TV. I just went back to my room and went to sleep.
That would have
But
been a dream. I was bored out of my mind. I was so bored.
uh, well, I was bored too, but I was also desperate to find out what was wrong with me and how to fix it.
And
Um,
so, did you
so
get
I was able
answers?
to. I didn't get answers there, no, but it got me into counseling or therapy. As soon as I got out, I started weekly appointments there. And then I was seeing a psychiatrist once a month. Initially, I saw that person once a week for the first month because
Yeah.
I was just a broken human, broken, broken, broken. We didn't know if it was my ADHD. We didn't know because we had been playing. Um, my regular physician had been playing with an autism level 1 diagnosis. So ADHD is the letters AUDHD. We didn't know if it was overstimulation for that, burnout. We didn't know if it was a personality disorder. And I have been in therapy and seeing the psychiatrist now monthly. I've been on a steady regimen of medications that have not changed in the last 6 months, and we have answers now. And when you have colleagues, friends, family, uh, mentors, everybody that's like, we care about mental health. The suicide families we get, our heart goes out to them. To see how I have been treated as I have gone through this discovery and sought help has just, it's crushed me. It's been very crushing. So those that wanted a reaction from me, you got it. I've spent so much time crying about being misunderstood.
Yeah. Can I ask you a hard question?
Of course.
My question is, do you think your online personality has created a culture of I gotcha? Do you think people would have treated you differently if you weren't a kind of agent of change or critique or investigation? I definitely have a sense that there's some of that in there a little bit.
Oh
But
yeah.
I know it's true that if there is a question of someone's sanity and mental health, that there's also a kind of backing away from people. I mean, it's certainly been an experience that I've had in a short amount of time simply for having anger or having grief. People have sort of stepped back or made distance from me, and that's been crushing. But also, it's been an education in that um, not everyone's your friend. Not everyone um, but also we use that word too much. I think we have a lot of acquaintances in the world. I think being connected online gives a strange sense of intimacy with people who we really haven't like done the work with to truly earn some of that intimacy. And definitely some of us are just tell everyone everything kind of people. I've
Oh
been a
God, yes. That's me.
Um, so I just wonder if a culture of online bullying, if a culture of like, because you have been an intense person to watch on the internet, and people love a car accident. They
Mhm.
love they love the kind of hardness that you go at people. I think call out cultures in the ether, and I've seen you change over time. And we've had a conversation once or twice in the past because I was like, "Whoa, I'm worried about how far this is going to go." Watching groups online where I'm seeing people jumping on attacking different female characters who are out there sort of making content about end of life. And so I just wonder, like, is the industry going at you because this is a moment of weakness? Or are they going at you because it's a mental health conversation? Or like Is there more to it?
Think because I was one of the first influencers, unwilling influencers online. Like, I didn't ask for this. I just suddenly had people following my account. So,
Mhm.
initially it was just my friends, and then it was like fucking everybody. So, when I was putting the information that I felt needed to be shared out online, I didn't have a PR person. I didn't have a spouse to go home to and talk about, you know, what was
The
going on.
process. Yeah.
Yeah. My friends, they hear enough death stuff. They don't want the drama too. Um, it's like, who do you talk to? And for the longest time, I wasn't able to access therapy. Um, so even my responses, if I was trying to correct somebody in maybe in their own comment section, my responses were too blunt. I was not explaining myself. People were taken aback that I was speaking to them that way. I'll be honest with you, most of the time I was like walking into the hospitals to go pick up a body, and I'd be driving the cart with one hand and typing in the other one. These were like this these weren't intentional short, mm, but yeah, developed a reputation for being a bitch online.
Mhm.
But anybody that's met me in person, they know that's not the case. It was actually a friendship, the what I thought was a friendship in the funeral industry that eventually was my downfall. An individual that I trusted enough to take a job recommendation from them and move across the country
Mhm.
had romantic interests in me, which I was
Okay.
unaware of. And because I did not reciprocate these romantic feelings to this individual, uh, they began to talk about me behind my back because I was so open with them. I had even reached out to them um, when I had had a previous crash out, like breakdown. This was back in 2021. I thought this was an individual that I could trust. So much so that they called me to be there with them when their dog was euthanized. Like, this was
That's
somebody I
close.
thought was my friend. Yes. So when this individual took a moment of weakness from me because I had discovered there was possible cheating in one of the state association award dinners, I came up with there's a story behind that, and I actually think that these, things that are done by state associations or are rigged, um, because I was also in a state association in Texas, and I saw how our little groups, like
Mm.
South Central or whatever other districts,
You
how
are
that
a
stuff was.
constant investigator. I love it.
Yeah, so I already knew that this stuff was bogus, and I had asked some of my clients that were now friends to submit me to be funeral director of the year for the state of Washington. Like, after I'd been here 2 years, I had already experienced two not so great employment things, and I was just looking for a good pat yourself on the back. So you nominate yourself. You also reach out to people to nominate you. Nowhere on this form did it say that the people nominating you had to be members of the state association. Nowhere on it. So I had maybe 4 to 6 letters that were sent in by families that I had helped in the past explaining, why I should be funeral director of the year. So when the night of the awards came, and I had never even been invited to come to the banquet, I knew something was awry. So I messaged this friend, and I was like, how come nobody contacted me about, the thing? I know I had entries. I know these people sent in stuff for me. And she goes, they weren't members of the, and that's it. It's in the bylaws. Because I was like, it's not on the paper that y'all put out, the post that said you were accepting these applications. And she goes, "It's in the bylaws." Oh, okay. Okay. So we're all supposed to know the bylaws? Makes no sense. So at this point, I was about 2 glasses of wine deep, and I'm not a drinker. But my landlords at the time, they had nice wine. So I think this was like a Friday night, and I had decompressed with them about my frustrations, and then went back to my apartment and messaged this individual, had this conversation, and then I opened voice notes and I sent them voice memo texts like, fuck you. I know what you're involved in with this. I know that this is rigged. You never were my friend. Um, you're see you next Tuesday. I never want to talk to you again. F you, F you, F you. This individual contacted my employer at the time and told them that I threatened them. And I lost my job.
So this industry, like, you really have to watch reputation. Reputation is everything in this industry, and I'm not shocked that this happened, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not either at all, but in the sense that this was somebody that was supposed to be my friend, I actually sent them a text right after that that said, "We are not friends, but we do have to work in the same spaces. Um, so I'll ignore you. You ignore me." And instead, they filed what is it? A protection order against me.
Protective order, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So do you know how easy it is to get a protective order in the state of Washington?
I do not.
You just ask for it, basically.
Okay.
So they'll give it to anybody. There was no proof of harm. There was no proof other than the voice memo, which I told the judge that that's what happened. I was like, I don't care. So this was a case where I didn't care if I had an anti-harassment order on me or not. I had no
Ooh.
intention of going anywhere near this individual. They got their year. Now, when they tried to renew it, after a year of me not doing anything, not saying anything to them, being completely silent about the interaction online, they tried to renew it and I didn't even show up that time. I just sent a letter to the judge like, look, this individual has been stalking me online for the last year. And, if we're going to entertain her being able to renew this, then I'm going to request one on her as well. And it went away.
So, given all that happened, if you were to have known what was going to go down, would you have still sent the "See you next Tuesday" voice memo? Would you do anything differently?
No, I
Was
wouldn't
it
have.
worth it?
No, and like I said, I'm not a drinker, and so that's not an excuse, but you know what? No, there are funeral directors every day that use an excuse of I'm an alcoholic or I was too
Oh,
stressed or I was this and I was
there's
that.
rampant compulsive behaviors in the funeral industry. The work we do is hard. The stress
Mhm.
we're under is intense. We live on the edges of a lot of things, and they're self-soothing, and there's a million ways to self-soothe. And just because coffee and fried chicken is more socially acceptable than other things, there's rampant alcohol abuse in the industry, there's rampant drug use in the industry, there's lots of secrets. Like, the work we do is hard.
Yeah.
um and everyone is going to self-soothe in some way, and whether it's shopping or church, like, there's so many different ways to self-soothe.
Yeah. But drinking was not my normal self-soothing activity. It was, I mean, people that have gone out with me in public, they know I don't drink. I mean, I don't. It's not something that's fun to me, and I don't want to spend $10 on something that's not fun to me.
Okay.
Uh,
So it took you a
so
little bit out of your normal orbit, and you acted a
totally
little
out
bit.
of my normal
Yeah.
orbit, and
Yes.
I acted out. I totally acted out because I was already frustrated. I don't know. I can't. It just it was out of my character, and this individual took it and ran with it,
Yeah.
and the fact that it cost me my job and then it was the spiral to cost me my reputation as well. It's like this person could have left it alone after I sent the text saying, "Hey, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that, but we have to work in the same spaces and go to the same places. So I'll just ignore you and I expect you to ignore me." Like I expected that to be the end of it. And
Yeah.
instead this person took the volume and amplified it up to 100.
Yeah.
And I can't understand, when you hear people say that they care about mental health and stuff like that. Why would you purposely harm somebody that is just doing their best? I had told this person before my mental health struggles. Like,
Mhm.
again, we established we were friends, but I didn't know, and I didn't know that their parasocial relationship with me not meeting those expectations would be grounds to be exposed
Well,
this way.
I think a lot of times looking back in life, more relationships I've had are transactional than I would like to believe or like to say. And it's just something that teaches you to have a more discernment about who's in your inner circle, but also how powerful it is to be transparent with people. I think talking about this is important. I think it sounds like you've learned some lessons, but also the thing about secrets or the thing about shame is that when you kind of put more light into things, like you can start to unpack things and sort of hopefully mitigate the reputation that was damaged because of these kinds of back-to-back events that sounded like they happened pretty close in time, because I remember hearing about you and sort of hearing through the grapevine about what was happening, and it just seemed like a clusterfuck of a lot of things.
Yeah, it was like my enemies banded together. And I know that sounds so conceited, but there were people that have been in the industry, in Facebook groups and in private groups, that have monitored every post I've done and made fun of me for everything that I've said or
Oh
done.
yeah, I mean,
And
I've observed this. There's a ton of people who hate you. Period.
yeah, there's also secret groups out there that other funeral directors don't know about that are just embalmers who care on steroids. Um, so there are some individuals in these groups that have always had it out for me. And so this former friend knew that because I'd been transparent with them of what I'd struggled with, making a name for myself online and how that was translating to not being able to progress, and get a real job and stuff like that. Like they knew all this. And just to have somebody weaponize all of that against you over a
Well,
voice memo when you're drunk with no threats, like I still have the voice memo. So, I mean, they're welcome to release it. I
I mean, you
can
should
too.
probably release it. I mean, if it's caused this
Actually,
much reputation, why not? Just put it out there. Or not, I don't know, but it just seems like when it becomes like this shrouded thing, like I've never heard about the voice memo, so that never made it up to me. But I'm not
mhm,
following this that closely. A lot of people were talking about you. And I think it had
yeah,
a lot to do with how kind of caustic your personality was in terms of calling out things or going really hard at certain embalming companies, chemical companies, and how hard you were taking it. And so people wanted to dish it back.
yeah,
So I think an entire conversation could be had with you and a panel of people on online bullying because it's rampant. The misogyny is real. I'm a man and I experience misogyny all the time online, in terms of other people who don't love me because I'm a natural burial person or community death care person, or I occasionally work with groups that completely circumvent funeral homes. The old industry does not want anything to change, and they are so out to lunch with what is happening right now that the industry is actively in the shift, as the NFDA calls it. And there's so much change coming. And so, in some ways, you are going to become a scapegoat as you continue to be this person because the industry's period is changing. Cremation rates are exploding. Women
hmm
are at the seat of the table in terms of the industry. We're going to lose, like, what is it, 40, 50% of funeral directors to retirement in the next 3 years or less. Like we're in rapid warp speed change right now. And we have Gen
yeah,
X owners who aren't scared of cuss words, who have a more open-minded kind of view of what ceremonies can look like. We're seeing funeral directors internationally pushing the envelope about what ceremonies can look like, natural burial, kinds of disposition. Like they're just coming at the old guard from all the directions, and they're so angry. And
You know what?
so,
I'm happy about this. I think it's great that there are so many different people, from death doulas to funeral arrangers, grave diggers, on social media showing the behind the scenes. I made my impact. If for what has happened now, I can recover from this, but I made my impact. I was one of the first 5 people that was really showing behind the scenes and talking about this stuff online.
yeah.
Um, that my transparency is what gained me a following, and I don't have to do it anymore because there's 1,000 other people just like me that are now able to share their experiences and what they're doing. I trained those people basically. I helped the movement in death care, and I would say that would be my greatest that was my goal after I stopped embalming,
Mhm.
and I'd say I achieved that goal. So,
That's good
I don't
because it
know.
doesn't sound sustainable to you, is what I'm hearing from you. So I think
Yeah.
it's good to open up and sort of shape shift. I mean, look, I've been in the industry for like 5 minutes. I've barely had my license a few years. And I'm really flattered that your perception of me is so large. But I'm still a baby funeral director and I'm looking for new work right now and I'm exploring. I've spent the last few months, I just needed a break from my life. And so I got in the car and I drove to North Carolina, which it just got a hurricane, and I just left in Florida, which I left hurricanes, and then I went to New York, and I've just been thinking a lot about grief and about death care and about how I want to function in this industry and if I want to stay in this industry or if I want to move into sales. I feel really drawn to grief though. So I think it's good to sort of evaluate where the industry's at and where you might want to see yourself because I don't think staying in any one of these archetypes of being is useful if you're not thriving.
Yeah. Um, the stuff that I've experienced and the ability to unpack it all in therapy has made me realize I don't want to be a funeral director again.
Okay. Okay.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to own a business. My initial alliances were with like the Funeral Consumers Alliance, a Home Funeral Alliance, things like that. And I was made fun
Mm-hmm.
of for it by my colleagues. My experience going through the mental health system makes me want to somehow help widows and widowers, or whoever is left behind, navigate those next steps. There's something in that. It's like community service to the community. I can't sell things. I can sell. I mean, I'm a great salesperson, but I don't want to sell things to people that are grieving. I can't get past that. I want to be a resource connector. And
Yeah.
so kind of to go back a little bit, something that a lot of people don't know is that I could have been helped a long time ago, if I'd had access to insurance.
Yeah.
Because the last time I had insurance that was good, where I was seeing a counselor, was back in 2016. So, and then I was also dating a clown who convinced me after I lost my insurance, to stop taking my antidepressants because they were a crutch, and I did it. So that sent me on a little spiral. And that's again when I was online, and because that's when my journey into the online presence started, was back in 2016. So,
Yeah. Well, it sounds like being a small business owner is hard. And quite frankly, having owned a few different businesses, I didn't have insurance a lot of times, and that wasn't a great thing. Needing more stability there, I think, is a good thing for you to declare. So I think living our lives only online is can be dangerous and can give us a warped sense of ourselves. I mean, look, I used to get so upset online about politics, and I wasn't a very political person and probably till Occupy happened. But I remember the kind of rush, and I think it's cortisol and adrenaline is what would be fired off because I've been trying to learn about the biochemical of this because like
mhm.
online definitely Like, there's compulsion there. I mean, Gen Alpha, they're so fucked. These kids are like dopamine slot machines in their hands. They are screen zombies. And like the
Mhm.
internet and the social component added with the internet has changed our bodies and brains. We're pushed to fight online and we're pushed to even be these extra characters. Like, I am the most mild manner person in real life. But
Mhm.
online, I definitely can get spicy. People love it. I try to be really intelligent when I kind of go at someone in an argument or debate. But I've also learned over time that I lost friendships that bummed me out and it made me want to temper and curb kind of who I was in my 30s. Because in real life, if I couldn't or wouldn't say those things to you, I try not to say those things online. That's kind of my measure
Oh,
now.
gosh, yeah, and being an online, I guess, personality, if they wanna call it that, with the
Yeah.
amount of followers that I have, I've always heard feedback that says, "I didn't expect you to reply to me. I didn't expect you to reply."
Oh,
While
you
all of
reply
that
to
is
everything.
good, I do. Yes, I do,
For
but
better or
especially
worse.
my DMs, I have gotten such vitriol and hatred in my DMs before. And sometimes getting several of those in a row, and then I'd go back into something else, feeling attacked. Maybe I didn't process a comment, but I likely didn't process a comment correctly and was very brief back. Yeah, I definitely should have had somebody monitoring my social media, or I should have gone with the old adage of don't read the comments.
I mean, it was still, I think, the early part of the internet, and you were an early part of a kind of culture of opening up Deathcare to the public, to pulling the gate back and looking at it. And when I was in school, you were absolutely a person who was up there with Monica Torres, who was up there with Caitlin, who was up there with Hollis. I mean, there were so few people doing it, so that was a big deal for me. And you had a lot to do with me learning about natural burial and seeking out other people on the internet who were talking about it. And now there's so many people making content about it. It's wild.
My job is done.
Well, I think that's good. I think it's good to figure out where next. And
Oh
you
yeah. Well,
started to sort of
I was going to say I told somebody in a job interview in 2002 that I didn't want to help them be the face of their social media. Like that was not something I was looking to do anymore. Like it's like I'm too old for this. I don't want to be an internet
you're a
personality.
baby. You're a baby. You've
Yes.
got lots of time to be lots of different things still.
Yeah, we'll
Um,
see.
well, you got to be something next. So whatever next is next. I'd like to talk about a little bit about some more about something I'm toying with. I'm thinking about starting a hotline.
So attempts at healing and professional support that are currently available out there, there's not a lot, is there?
I mean, there's some. I certainly have noticed on the NFDA, kind of peer to peer groups, which I think is a big deal.
Or of a Facebook group, funeral service support. I
Hmm.
believe Caleb Wild mods that one.
Okay.
Uh, but somebody made fun of my podcast in there one day and I exited the group. I was like, this is supposed to be a support group, not a dickhead group.
Yeah.
But I take things very personally, so maybe they weren't. What do you want to contribute to resources that are available to people?
Well, I need funeral directors need more resources. This last year with the IFDF, we had an entire conference on sort of self care, unpacking a conversation with a really special presentation from Monica Torres about burnout. And I think we need to be talking about burnout. And it's not a 1 year topic, it's an ongoing topic. Because quite frankly, funeral directors are secretive about burnout. They're secretive
Mhm.
about drinking, they're secretive about whatever they use to cope. And when we get together for conferences, we eat and drink. Like, I've never seen conferences that eat and drink as hard as funeral directors go.
Mhm.
I'm kind of happy to see a little bit of weed happening at some of these conferences because I think we need to see people ratchet things down a little bit and be a little bit less judgy about sort of other ways to burn off some steam and self-soothe. But I also think we really need to attend to kind of new to the industry people. I see an enormous disconnect from people who are fresh to the scene and how they're being treated. I feel like I've had 20 to 50 conversations in the last year with young women who are being sexually assaulted at work, who are
Mhm.
being hazed at work, harassed at work. I see young men kind of being challenged by the old guard in really intense ways. I was bullied like crazy in my internship by my manager, and it was awful. And I was really, really, really supported by my professional association.
Mhm.
Dr. Ruth Bedell specifically was someone who was incredibly kind to me and took time to talk with me about the minutia of fights and give me reframe and advice. And I think we specifically need almost like a task force that needs to kind of come up and be in existence in this time of transition because it's like maximum friction. I've talked with some people about starting a hotline, but just a peer to peer kind of hotline in which someone young to the industry is experiencing just kind of like workplace bullying that's kind of entry level. And then from
Mhm.
there, could direct people to bigger resources and fast tracking and connecting the dots. I think sometimes it's like 411. 411 isn't reinventing the wheel, but it's connecting people to resources faster, giving people advice. This work is emotional labor. It is relentless. I mean, when I was an intern, I had like 19 overnight calls like per month, and I only had one weekend off a month for years. Like my life completely turned into something else. And I fully believe you have to pay your dues, but there was not a lot of work life balance. My
Mhm.
manager at the time was bullying me and doing really crappy things to me, and I was very, very meticulous about documenting it. But you know what? It doesn't feel good coming into an industry and being treated like this. And I
No.
know for a fact a ton of young people or new to the industry when they're on their second or third careers, people coming into the industry are being treated like trash because the old guard is angry about
Mhm.
change,
Mhm.
and like hot pink hair is just setting them off. It is making them crazy. They are
Yeah.
so angry. There's a tattoo on the arm. And they're not in step with modern society. And I can't wait for Gen X to be fully at the table because it's going to calm some of the generational tension down. It's not going to be as awful, but we are in the shift. What that means right now is we are at maximum friction. We have labor shortages that are rampant. And we have tons of people coming into the industry and immediately exiting the industry in a few years because they won't be treated like this. And the industry is just like incensed that younger people or new to the industry people won't tolerate this behavior that was pretty common not that long ago.
Yeah, absolutely. The same way that you are wanting to open up a resource, that's exactly why I developed Exposing Death Care, the podcast, was because I wanted other listeners to know that they were not alone in what they were experiencing. And that if we talk about this, then we are addressing it and we are looking for solutions. And, I got a lot of pushback when I first launched the podcast, but if you really listen to it, you'll see that that is the focus, is that we're trying to better the industry for everybody else and make others feel like they're not as alone.
Like, when I hear the title, it feels like investigative journalism. But if it truly is about being solution oriented, that's a big deal.
Well, I
Because
think it's also important to have your title grab people's attention.
this
Like
is
again,
true.
I don't have a PR person, I don't have a marketing person. I just do what comes naturally to me, and
Yeah.
if they yeah. Yeah. So wouldn't you check out that podcast if you'd never heard it before and all of a sudden it showed up? Ooh, what is this?
Well, I mean, your name alone still carries a lot of weight. I know you're not sure if
My
it
name's
does.
not on it. My name's not on it.
Is it?
I
Well,
go,
I
I
know that you're involved in it, so well then I guess you got to John Stewart it
eh,
a little bit and have a few different anchors.
oh, poodle. Yeah, I should do that, even though like the people I would trust to do this have very recognizable voices.
That's okay.
Um, Something I want to bring up that I am seeing with this online education and stuff that's going on, others are starting to be affected. So I had a complaint on my license last year that I was showing deceased bodies on my Instagram.
Yeah.
And I had to humble myself and contact several families and other individuals that were privy to these interments and get them to write statements, including my favorite was from one cemetery that was like, "That is a plastic skeleton in a shroud for photographic purposes." It is, or dead. It is not dead. Um, there were some of them were living people that were posing. It was dismissed, but still the stress of having to go through explaining that and whatever else people decided to throw at me. Other online personalities are starting to be affected. Mortician Miranda.
Oh, she
Uh,
specifically, I've always wanted a panel with her to talk about it.
yeah,
I'm so bummed out. I loved her content so much. And she clearly wants to make content because she's now doing kind of her performance work
yeah.
in what seems like an attempt to continue creating content work. But her work was so good to have her state be like, nope, you can't do this. It
Mhm.
sucks because I
Well,
really liked her work.
what started it, she made a post on TikTok explaining it. Somebody said that she had showed a dead body in her Refinery 29 docu-series or documentary that was
Yeah.
on YouTube.
Yeah.
And by the way, fun fact, I was also interviewed for that documentary, and they asked me, "Can we film a dead body?" And I said, "Uh-uh." I said, "No, no, 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 no. We can't do that." And I that's probably the reason why I was rejected. I would assume so, but anyway, they talked to other friends of mine too, and they ditched them. But Miranda got that opportunity, and I could tell the minute I saw it, I was like, "That's a living body." Under there, I was like, "Why would they let her have a living body and I couldn't stage it?" You know, of course, I'm butthurt because I Melissa's not getting the attention.
But why can't you do it with
Um,
the release? If there's a release, why is there a problem?
Yep, I had been involved in documentaries with like National Geographic, Explorer, where we did have releases signed, and that's fine. But we, again, this was a living body that she was using. That these funeral directors were all making complaints against her license, saying it was a dead body in the film. Dude, Miranda is the best person they could have picked for that little documentary because she's just so perfect at being an embalmer and just explaining things, the outfit she put on, just everything about that, and then for them to attack her and hurt her self-confidence. I know they've done it to other online personalities other than me and, now recently her, but it's just so shitty, so shitty. It takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there to try to create educational content. Like, I haven't figured out how to monetize my stuff. You would think with having almost 200,000 followers on 2 platforms that I would have figured out how to monetize it a long time ago. No, this is not a living. At most I get $20 a month from Instagram. Um,
Oh, that's
so
it?
we're not. Yeah. Yeah, no. Like this, people think because you have so many followers that you make money. No, you have to have product, you have to have continuous content that's over a minute long. I don't have that in me anymore. I don't wanna do it. So, don't, and I don't make any profits from it. But, again, for people that are putting themselves out there to create this content, there is such an animosity from those who don't have the cojones to put themselves out there, um, my opinion.
Well, again, I think we're in a huge transitional moment, and I think we're going to see a lot of change around that because the public's interested in this. We have the largest generation in the history of the country coming to end of life. And death literacy and death positivity are here, and people want more access. And Gen X, as it firmly takes control of funeral homes, is going to soften this position because this gatekeeping is another generation. It's silent gen. It's on the older side of baby boomers, and like those people aren't going to be running the show much longer.
Let's hope that they take their bullying ways with them too.
I think that should be literally its own panel discussion.
Yep. Absolutely.
I think a lot of young and new to the profession people need to know how rampant it is, how out of control it is, how toxic the misogyny is, how
Hmm.
gross and sort of revenge oriented it is. I've been shocked by it, and I found myself early in school joining groups and leaving them because I didn't find them to be that educational, and they
Hmm.
felt like water coolers for nasty, nasty, nasty energy.
Yep. There's a lot of that going on in the states associations that I tried to, interact with, but we won't go there.
Well, I'm
Um,
really, really proud of my state association in Florida. We're of an incredibly progressive organization and dedicated to having conversations about mental health. So I'm really proud of Florida.
since I have left Texas, I have seen younger faces in board positions for those organizations out there, and it looks promising. So since I haven't been
Yeah.
involved in Texas since whatever
Yeah.
2016, when did they denounce me? I don't know. I haven't been involved with them, so I don't know. But
Yeah. I feel
there's
like
room
the
for improvement
NFDA
in
is
Washington.
I feel like the NFDA has taken some pretty progressive stances, and I need to learn more about the ICCFA. I know a little bit about them, but I definitely feel like there's room for them to sort of step into this conversation also as the international body.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, I want to thank you for your bravery and coming on the show and actually sharing your name with us because, again, that was a first and a great first for the season finales. I always get them messed up. A series finale? No, you are not that lucky, Embalmers Who Care group. We are going to have another season episode coming up very soon, and it will start off for season 2. So bite me. Again, thank you so much, William. We really appreciate your input and your story.
Good. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to an episode of Exposing Deathcare, the podcast. I truly appreciate your support and the courage of those who have shared their stories with us. If you or someone you know has a story to share, we encourage you to reach out. Your anonymousness will be protected, and your story could help prevent further harm. You can leave comments, ask questions, or provide feedback on our social medias, Exposing Deathcare, or email exposingdeathcare@gmail.com. Podcast music by Enlia. Hey, everybody. A note from your host, M, aka the modern mortician, Melissa Meadow. I want to say thank you to everybody who's listened this season. It has been a surprise to see the numbers come in off my RSS feed, and I'm grateful. I'm so grateful to you guys for giving me a platform to share some of my experiences and some of yours.